The next most valuable material for the restore is yellow brass. And the most common products that yield yellow brass are plumbing fixtures like faucets and drains, electric light fixtures, chandeliers that are yellow brass, and hardware, doorknobs, and potentially a few hinges. In order to get the most value out of those products, however, requires a fair amount of labor. So I'll start with a common faucet. Here's one that hasn't been disassembled by the volunteers. And there's a variety of materials in there that can be salvaged. And again, remember the important tools are our magnet to recover iron material contamination and our file. Because the appearance of the housing for the faucet appear to be a silver or aluminum color, but often this, when you check it with a magnet, often this piece that encloses the faucet will be iron. And so if you mix those two, you've gone from iron at 7 cents a pound to either zinc die cast, which would be 50 cents a pound, or sometimes the housing is actual yellow brass. And again, the way I find out whether it's zinc die cast or yellow brass is to take the file and file a little B, and in this case it's a silver color and it's not magnetic. So this would be a product that's called zinc die cast, which I'll discuss later. And then these pieces are internal to the faucet, and again, checking with my magnet, it's not magnetic and it has the yellow cast to it, so this would be yellow brass. Here's some fittings. They don't stick to a magnet. And again, from experience of doing hundreds of faucets, I know those connections, when they are not magnetic, are yellow brass, because I filed them in the past. Here are two additional pieces of yellow brass that are the ends to the copper pipe. And then here's the copper pipe that was cut off. And there's two different grades of copper pipe that I'll discuss. Number one pipe, which has no solder contamination, and number two, which has some solder contamination. And just out of safety concerns, I recycle the pipe to faucets as number 2 copper pipe. And here's another fitting, checking with the magnet, it's non-magnetic, so I put it with the yellow brass. And here's a C-clip, it doesn't stick, and it's got the reddish yellow color. This piece was internal, it's still got a piece of plastic on which should be removed, and with a screwdriver it's easy to pop that off. And it's hard to tell what it is by its color. So again, using the file, I get a silver color, so this would be more zinc die cast. Here's that internal stem to the faucet, doesn't stick. But if you can look at this end, it's got a silver color to it. Filing shows me it's still a silver color, but it was hard to file. So I know then that this is actually stainless steel. So to get the best price for the yellow brass, I need to cut the stainless steel end off. And then here's some of the screws, and you'll see, checking with the magnet, they're iron. So if I had left this mixture together and tried to sell it as yellow brass, the first thing the buyer would have said was, no, that's contaminated yellow brass. I'll give you 25 cents a pound, rather than yellow brass at $1.75 a pound.
And all of the contaminants can still be recycled as scrap metal, right?
All the contaminants can be recycled, so I can still recycle this as iron and get 7 cents for it. But I've upgraded the yellow brass to clean. So these two screws didn't stick to a magnet. And again, from experience, I know they're stainless steel. I filed them and they're hard to file. So I'd throw those in the stainless steel bucket to keep it from contaminating the yellow brass. This handle doesn't stick. And when I file it, and it probably won't show, it actually turns out to be plastic, which is becoming very common. and it's lightweight, so that also tells me it's plastic. So between filing it and its weight, I know it's plastic, and there's no market for plastic, so this unfortunately goes in the trash. And these stems didn't stick. And when I file that one, it has a yellow cast to it, so I'd throw this one in with the yellow brass. So that's the disassembly and the importance of taking a faucet apart to get the highest value. Now, there's a lot of flexible connectors associated with plumbing, and checking with a magnet, it doesn't stick. So I know from experience the flexible hose itself is stainless steel, but the connectors on the ends, when you file the connectors, they have a yellow tint to them. So I use a bolt cutter, and I cut right where the groove is, and so I can recycle the screw nut as yellow brass at $1.75 a pound versus the stainless steel flexible tubing, which is still contaminated. And stainless steel contaminated brings me 10 cents a pound. And even though it seems insignificant, when you cut off 50 ends from stainless steel, you end up with a couple pounds of yellow brass. So it is worth the time to get the yellow brass off the end of the flexible tubes. And what you cut off can still be sold as contaminated yellow brass because there's still a stem inside that's yellow brass versus the stainless steel on the outside. Here's a spigot from a water fountain, and when I filed it yesterday in preparation, it was yellow underneath, so this spigot to a drinking fountain is yellow brass. Again, when I worked on this faucet yesterday to see what the materials were, I filed right there and it's yellow in color. And I filed one of the handles here and it's yellow in color. And I also filed the housing. So this one, except for some screws which are under the button here, probably the whole thing will end up being yellow brass. Contrary to this one where the housing was zinc die cast, this housing is all yellow brass. So this faucet turns out to be more valuable to us than that one. This is a common faucet that you see. It has plastic handles which have to be removed, and the top pops off and there's a screw inside that you unscrew. And again, unfortunately, there's no market for plastic. And you see there's some more plastic stem to the faucet, so this nut has to be removed and that plastic has to be removed. There's plastic on the bottom. There's a screen here on the faucet, and the screens are typically stainless steel, so that little screen needs to be popped out of there. And the housing, when I filed it yesterday, is silver in color, so this is another zinc die cast housing rather than yellow brass housing. And this one visually says it's yellow brass, but again, color is very misleading, so I still took the time yesterday to file a V in to make sure it was yellow underneath. Same thing with the handles, because sometimes the main housing and the handles will be two different materials. But in this case, it turned out the handle was also yellow brass. But again, there's still screws there, so you need to remove those to make sure they aren't iron. There's plastic on the bottom, and there's that stainless steel screen again. So one of the important messages I need to get across is don't believe the color. Always confirm the color with a file or with a hacksaw. So another product that brings us a fair amount of income from yellow brass are doorknobs. And so you can recycle the doorknob whole as it is and get about 25 cents a pound because of the iron contamination and the zinc die cast contamination in the hub there. So in order to upgrade this to get the $1.75 for the yellow brass, there's a C-clamp, a little clamp that's right there that's holding this product together. And when you move that C-clamp, you get this piece and you get this piece of housing. Both the C-clamp and the housing are iron, so that's 7 cents. But this piece doesn't stick, so this is $1.75. So it's labor intensive, so if you don't have the labor, you still should recycle this as contaminated yellow brass, getting 25 cents a pound. Whereas if you throw the whole thing in the iron, you only get 7 cents a pound. And then in the knob itself, there's this piece of zinc die cast, doesn't stick to the magnet, that holds the this piece of frame onto the door. And so the way to get that zinc die cast out of there, you have to use a chisel and pound it out. So again, that's why it's labor intensive. But again, if you want the $1.75, you have to go through the step of getting the zinc die cast out. And this is just a different form of a doorknob. And again, when you disassemble it, you get a piece of yellow brass like this. And sometimes the yellow brass will be plated with a silver color, or it may be stainless steel. So again, you have to use the file. And again, when I file it, there's a yellow color that shows up. So even though visually they appear to be different materials, in fact, this is yellow brass that's been plated to look like stainless steel. And then the key part of it, the basic material is zinc die cast, but the stem is iron. So to get the value out of the zinc die cast, that stem has to be removed, and there's a little C-clamp that's holding it in place. And then it appears they've got a piece of yellow brass plating it here. Check with the file, and it's yellow. And in order to get that off, again, the usefulness of the wire cutter. Now I get $1.75, even though it's a little piece, it all adds up. And then when you take this C-clamp out, the rest of it comes apart. And so you end up with some iron, and you end up with some zinc die cast. Now, one of the scourges of doing plumbing is, as I mentioned earlier, plastic is becoming more popular. So here's a shower head that looks to be some kind of metal. But when you take your file and file it, underneath it's a gray piece of plastic. So this has no value to the recycling program. And this was a piece of a shower door, which again visually appears to be yellow brass. And when I file it, it's gray underneath. So it's another piece of plastic made to look like yellow brass. And here's some locking plates from hardware. And these 4 pieces look to be yellow brass, but when you look at the edge of this one, it's silver in color. So it's either iron or aluminum. When I check with the magnet, it doesn't stick, so this piece is actually aluminum made to look like yellow brass. So these 4 pieces don't stick to a magnet and appear to be yellow brass, but again, I check them just to make sure it's yellow. That's yellow. This one appeared to be silver, but underneath it's a yellow color. So this is yellow brass plated to look like silver. This one also has a yellow tint to it. So again, it's plated to look like stainless steel, but in fact, the majority of the material is yellow brass. And here's a piece of yellow brass. Oh, it sticks to a magnet, even though visually it appears to be yellow brass. So this would be iron. And here's a replacement end to a hose. Turns out to be iron repair part and a brass insert. And it's very difficult to get those two separated, so I in fact sell this as contaminated yellow brass because I don't have the time to take them apart. And this was another faceplate. And again,